Hi, everybody. Hello, my Gould friends. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I want to thank Hilda, first of all, for her faith in me that I'd be able to pull this off because she heard me give this presentation a couple of weeks ago and came up with this idea that I should share it with Gould friends. So here I am, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me start by sharing my screen. So I entitled this talk Around the World in 7,300 Days because I've been traveling extensively for 20 years and did a little multiplication and came up with 7,300 days. Now, when I was at Gould, graduating in 1961, my world was really small. I don't think I'd actually been on an airplane. I'd only been to Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. Oh, and Massachusetts. So my world was really about New England pretty much. And I never thought that I would be doing what I'm currently doing and living this amazing life where I've gotten to travel all over the world. It all started on April 18th, 2001, when Bruce Berger said, "Will you marry me and let's travel the world?" So here's the world we traveled. We've been to all of these continents, including Antarctica, which is actually not on this map. But I thought I'd show you what 76 countries in 20 years looks like by making this table that lists all of the countries that I've been to. Now, please know that this does not include countries where we just touch down with our planes need to refuel or to change planes. I've actually spent time in these countries. It's a little overwhelming, but trust me, I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm just going to give you a sense of where I've been since 2001. So after we got married, like a lot of honeymooners, we went to romantic spots and we traveled to a lot of different places in the Caribbean. And one of the things that we got into was snorkeling. So we swam over the years in many different oceans and snorkeled in some pretty amazing places. Now, these are the countries that we've done real snorkeling in. Not all the ones in the Caribbean, but I think of all of these countries, my favorite countries are the Maldives, the Galapagos, and surprisingly to some of you, the Philippines. And the reason for that is that the snorkeling in the Philippines is very different in that you get to swim with whale sharks. Now, these are really monster fish, and you swim on top of them, or above them, I should say, and you kick like hell with your fins, but they swim much faster than you do, so you can't stay up with them for very long. Then you pull yourself back up in the boat, and you wait for the next one. It's a big workout, and it was a lot of fun, and we did it for a couple of days. And while you're snorkeling, you get to see some other amazing creatures like this really colorful starfish. But these are the really amazing people, and they are the people of Papua New Guinea. This man is the village chief, and he has a crown of dog teeth around his head. And it was really our first really exotic adventure. It was probably in Papua New Guinea and maybe even this picture that turned me on to people. And I love photographing people, as you will see. Now, this young boy in Papua New Guinea is covered with a sort of a paste that I think was for a sunscreen. Now, we saw some interesting sights, and when I took this picture and saw the result, I thought, wow, I could send this to National Geographic. Well, actually, I kind of laugh at myself now because you don't send things to National Geographic. They have their own photographers, of course. But remember when we used to look at National Geographic when we were kids and we saw pictures like this and it was just like, whoa, we didn't know what to make of it, but it was something we'd never seen before, that's for sure. My favorite place to go is Africa, and I think it's because of the diversity there. As you can see, we've been to 13 countries, and this little girl with her California t-shirt is in Cote d'Ivoire, which was our last trip, the Ivory Coast, in February of 2020, right before COVID started. But our first experience in Africa was on a safari. And I think that that's probably what most people do when they go to Africa for the first time, because it's really crazy and fun. And I love this picture because even with my 12 megapixel camera, a point and shoot that I had at the time, I think I captured the real thunder of these elephants coming into the water hole and chasing away the zebra and the monkeys. And the other thing that's exciting is to see wild animals in the wild. So if you saw elephants in the zoo, you're not going to see ones with bloody tusks or wounds on their bodies. Nor will you see anything like this. So here's the situation going on in this picture. We were in our little Jeep and we get a call from another guide somewhere saying that there's an amazing site about a quarter of a mile away, and there's a lion that has just taken down an antelope and that we really ought to come and see. So this radio blast goes out to every vehicle in the area. So yeah, every vehicle gets on that one little road to get to the lions, but the elephants have a different idea in mind. So we never did get to see that particular lion. In Namibia, we rode an ATV up and down the sand dunes. Now, going up was fine, coming down was scary as hell, and I vowed after that trip that I would never ride an ATV again, and I never have. But I think what was most exciting in Namibia on this trip was meeting our first African tribe, and those are the Himba people. This is a Himba woman, and she is staying behind with the children while her nomadic husband goes out with the sheep and the goats. Now, yes, these are nomads, but the word nomad is really different today in that you can't just cross any border. There's immigration, there are passports. So the word nomadic sort of implies that they are people who move around in a small area with their sheep and goats. But the women do stay behind and take care of the kids, of course. And here we have some very distraught-looking Maasai women in Tanzania. And they are obviously really upset about something. And I think that's what I love about people photography, is when you catch people unaware, you can create these stories out of these pictures, and you kind of wonder what was really going on. We're really not sure what was going on here. We are in the Simien Mountains of northern Ethiopia when we came across this band of children. And we really don't know where they were coming from or where they were going, because Simien Mountains are very remote. Now, we were traveling with a group of friends, and one of the women had some medication with her, so she was able to treat a terrible cut on this girl's head, one of the girls. And she always carries medication with her, and trust me, she's used it many, many times. Here in Ethiopia, the diversity includes a religious aspect, and that is here in Lalibela, where there are these amazing rock-hewn churches that have been carved out of mountains, and they go back to the 9th and 10th centuries. Now, a lot of pilgrims come here every year for a religious celebration. If you walk down below, like going over to the right-hand side of the photo, and you go into the building, it's very bare, but you know it's a holy site. There's something that you feel when you're there, and so you know it's very special. What's also special about Ethiopia are the tribes in South Omo. There are many of them. This is a Mercy woman. What you see hanging from her lower lip is actually her lower lip, which has been stretched out, which begins when they're early teenage years. And when eventually they become so stretched out that they can insert a clay plate. In fact, that's how they actually stretch the lip. And they think that they're beautiful with their lips like this. Well, we certainly had a different reaction, but it made a great picture for sure. The pile of hay you see behind her is where she lives. So let me tell you, this is really remote country of South Omo. The Mercy are very aggressive, and we had to pay to get these pictures, but that was okay. They really have no other way to make a living. And they usually don't need to make a living per se, but I think we're able to help out. Now, I don't consider myself a nature photographer by far, but occasionally I'll get a decent bird picture and then I'll want to show you. So this is a black African ibis. It's in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is really rich with bird life. A lot of people go there just to bird. Not just to see the tribes or to see the religious sites. So you can see Ethiopia offers a lot to people who travel. But also, Ethiopia is a place for this endemic baboon called the gelada. Not gelato, gelada. And they are very interesting baboons in that they recognize color. And by that I mean that they recognize a dark-skinned person versus a light-skinned person. And they're genetically predisposed to run away from black people who live in Ethiopia because they've been hunted for years and years. So I was able to approach these baboons and take this picture, and they didn't run away. But others that live there, and especially our guide, who was very dark-skinned, could not go anywhere near them. Now, this is the largest mud structure in the world. It's in Mali, West Africa. It's a mosque. And I was amazed to learn when we were in Mali that a third of the world's structures are made of mud, which is really quite remarkable. I can't show you the entire structure. Well, I don't have a picture of the entire structure, but I'm showing you this one because I want you to see the beautiful mud cloth that they make in Mali. I bought some, and it's on a table where we don't really spend any time. So there's no possibility that I'll spill a glass of red wine on the tablecloth. Now, this man is a Tuareg, and he was our guide in the city of Timbuktu in northern Mali. Now, when I was growing up, people would use the phrase that included the word Timbuktu, and I just thought it was an expression. I didn't have any idea that there was actually a place in the world called Timbuktu, and it's in Mali. It's a historical city, but recently it's very dangerous to go there, as well as to any place in Mali, because Islamic terrorists have kind of taken over. And in Timbuktu, they've imposed Sharia law, which is really tragic. But we were able to go there, and it was such a learning experience. But the real reason that we went to Mali was so that we could attend the Desert Music Festival in the desert, of course, outside of Timbuktu. Maybe, I'm going to say 30 miles, and it took us all day to get there because the sand was so deep and our supposed four-wheel vehicles did not have four-wheel drive. So it was an adventure, to say the least. The picture you're looking at really represents just a tiny bit of what we saw there. There were hundreds and hundreds of Tuaregs who look like this. They ride these beautiful white camels that are highly decorated, and there's the most incredible music that plays all night long. And during the day, there are various music groups that are sort of riffing on the side of the sand dune. And maybe there were, like, I'm going to say 25 to 30 Westerners who were there, mainly Europeans, mainly photographers. All I know is that I could list this as one of the top 5 most exciting adventures that I've ever had in my life. And I'm really sorry that they had to close down the Desert Music Festival, because I'd love to go back, although I'm never going to. So I covet this photo. So we've been in a lot of deserts. We are in Sudan. And Sudan is a very interesting place. But what you're looking at here is the holy mountain of Jebel Barkal. It's in northern Sudan, and what's going on below it is an excavation dig with a group of archaeologists from the University of Milan in Italy. Now, the archaeologists use local workers to do the hard lifting and wheeling out the dirt, while they, the specialists, spend time sort of using their fine brushes to reveal the antiquities. We saw a number of excavations going on while we were there, and it was historical and very unique. I love pictures of people because after I come home, I study them, and then I tell stories to myself and to others about what I see in their eyes. This is a Sudanese woman that we visited, and we had a conversation. She knew a tiny bit of English, very, very little, but she was so beautiful. I asked her if I could take her picture, and obviously she obliged. What's also very unique about Sudan is that there's a nomadic culture there as well. These nomads live way out in the desert, and they're hard to find because your GPS on your map doesn't have a designation of this, the nomads live here. So we had to spend some time roaming around the desert, where there are no roads, by the way, to find this enclave. Now, the men go out with their goats and sheep, and the women stay behind with the children. I suspect that these 2 women are the wives of one man, as are the children of one man, because that's very common in Africa, and it's especially common in Sudan, especially among the nomadic cultures. Now we're in Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa, also known as the Ivory Coast, where we were last year, 2020, before COVID. One of the things I love to do as a photographer is fill the frame with faces like this. And I usually focus on one person. And as you can see who that is, and you can see how everybody else is trying to get my attention. But she knows she's beautiful. I know she's beautiful. And so here you go. In Cote d'Ivoire, we attended a number of ceremonies. They were rites of passage, initiation ceremonies for young men. And they involved dancing and music, drums and horns especially. But the dancing was wild, and the costumes were even more exotic. So we saw maybe 4 or 5 different initiation ceremonies during the 2 weeks we were there, of course, in different villages. And it was very exciting. But after a while, I wanted to roam around and take pictures of people, because it's hard to get photographs of dancers. That's a video opportunity, and that's what Bruce does. He shoots video. So I took this picture of this woman and baby. I love this picture. It's one of my favorites, but it was one of the hardest ones I had to take, mainly because when I saw her, I knew I didn't have time to fiddle around with my camera, and I just had to pray that I had my settings right because I was looking right into the sun. And this is what I was able to capture. When she heard the click of my camera, she turned and looked at me, and I thought, oh, so glad. I hope this comes out, because once she turned, she obscured the baby, and that shot was lost. Cote d'Ivoire is really known for its export of cotton. And cotton is grown there. It's abundant. We saw it being spun, we saw it being woven, and now we're seeing it, woven on these very crude looms in a setting where there were a lot of young men about the age of this young guy. And they produced beautiful clothes. Unfortunately, they're not really made to fit American bodies. So I didn't buy any clothes because I knew I wouldn't wear them when I got home, but I did buy a bag and some placemats. And we're still in Cote d'Ivoire. I picked this picture to show you because fishing does go on. It's really subsistence fishing. And I like this picture because the people aren't looking directly at you, except for the little boy in the middle, and that's okay. But if they were all looking at me, it wouldn't have the same appeal. And Cote d'Ivoire is a very poor country. So when we were traveling and we came across this basilica, we were shocked. Millions of dollars went into the building of this by the once president of Cote d'Ivoire. It was his way of replicating St. Peter's Cathedral. We went inside. We weren't allowed to take photos, but it was really very beautiful. Stained glass windows. Everything was perfect, except that it was built in a country that really needed to use their money in a way to help the people. So this head was sort of like a sad story. Now, I could have shown you a completely restored pyramid in Egypt, like the ones outside of Cairo in Giza. But I wanted to show you one that was in a sort of a phase of restoration, so you could see what a pyramid looked like before it was restored. Now in Egypt, everybody's given an opportunity to ride a camel. And Bruce looks so happy. He's waving to me. I'm sitting on the camel in front of him. The next morning, he did not look like that. He could barely walk. Both of us were so sore from riding the camel. So again, like the ATV, I will never ride a camel again. Another desert, another country. We're in Morocco. I've just woken up from my tent and stepped outside, and this is what I saw. The sun was rising, and it created these beautiful shadows on the sun. Morocco was really interesting in so many different ways. It's also interesting because of its architecture. This is an ancient Casbah that I was walking to by crossing these little sandbags on this stream. And the Casbah is really old, but there are still people living there. And we found out that it's been used as a site for many American films. Not surprising. Now, architecture in Morocco is very different from the architecture in China. We went to China primarily to meet and photograph the people that live in southwest China that are members of ethnic minority groups. Now, it won't surprise you to learn that the Chinese are trying to sort of dismantle the lives of the ethnic minority groups in China. And they are not putting them in re-education camps like they are the Uyghurs, because these people are not Muslims. But China was really interesting, but it was also really beautiful. I wanted to show you a picture of the mountains. This is a Leaping Tiger Gorge picture. I'm not showing you the gorge. I think the mountains are a lot more beautiful. And speaking of beautiful, isn't this woman just incredible? To think that she was willing to smile at a complete stranger who was holding a camera. And here she is with no teeth. How many of us would do that? She's really beautifully put together. She has her little earrings. Her hair is nicely coiffed with a little bun and the comb. She's even wearing a little lipstick, but she's totally unabashed and she's willing to be vulnerable for the stranger who is taking her picture. Here we are in Yangon, Myanmar, which you've heard a lot about Myanmar these days. Also not good. A Yangon will never probably look like this again for at least a long time. But here's a little pop-up kitchen on a back street. This woman is making a traditional soup. And I never eat street food because I don't want to get sick. But we did have this food, a soup actually, many times when we were in Burma. Burma is interesting for so many different ways. There are many different ethnic groups that live in Burma. I guess you could say they're tribes. This is a man who is fishing on Inle Lake. And I know I have my name to the left there a couple of times. I guess I just haven't figured out how to get rid of it. But anyway, I think he was really doing this for money because I've seen a lot of pictures that look just like this that other people have taken. And not people who we were traveling with, not our friends. They got this same picture. But I think that this guy, or maybe some that look very much like him, wearing the same outfit, are out to be a photo op for tourists. I saw our boatman give the man a bill, which he tucked in his pocket. But I don't care, I like the picture anyway, and I got great light on his shirt, so you get to see it. You'll also get to see this young woman who's a member of the long neck tribe. Well, in Burmese, it's got a very different name, but the Americans call it long neck. Now, she's really attractive as a teenager, but as she grows and they add additional rings around her neck, I think that she will fade in her beauty because her neck will be stretched out and it's not very pretty. They always wear these coils, even as older women who have been wearing these coils for many, many years. But you can tell by the number of coils that their necks are really stretched, and they look a little freaky, quite honestly. Now, every photographer wants to come back from Burma with a photograph like this. Oh, hallelujah, I got one. We're in a balloon, just like the balloons you see in front of you, and we are flying over the Bagan Plain in Myanmar. It's very early in the morning, and the reason that the Bagan Plain is so special is because there are over 4,000 stupas and temples that reside on the Bagan Plain, and when you're in a balloon, you have this magnificent sight, and you really hope you get a morning with fog like this because it adds to the mystery of the photo. Now, on our way to Borneo in Indonesia, we stopped off in the Sultanate country of Brunei. And this is a very famous mosque in Brunei. And I love the reflection, of course. But more importantly, I love this picture of these two little girls that were sitting outside of the mosque. And I love that she's soaking her feet because I bet those red Mary Janes were too tight for her. When you go to Borneo, you go there to see nature and wildlife, especially orangutans that you see here. Now, what's really sad is that much of the rainforest in Borneo is being burned down. So a lot of rescue groups have gone in and they have preserved thousands of acres of rainforest. so that these orangutans can live just like they live in the wild. Now, we did see them in the wild, but they were hard to photograph. As I said, I'm not a nature photographer or a wildlife photographer, so this was the best I could do on orangutans. It's also the best I could do with the proboscis monkey. You know, they don't exist outside of the country of Borneo. Uh, and the reason is because of this plant that this monkey is sitting in. This plant only grows on the island of Borneo. So the proboscis monkey, only being able to eat this plant, can't live outside of Borneo. So if you've ever seen a proboscis monkey before, it's in a picture like this, unless you've been to Borneo. They're so funny. I took a lot of pictures. They're characters. They they got the Jimmy Durante nose, but they got the Stephen Colbert sense of humor. Now, we were driving from Dubai, crossing the border into Oman on the Persian Gulf. And we asked the driver if he would stop and let us take a picture of this because it was the only fishing production that we've seen. Now, we've been to a lot of fish markets and usually overwhelmed by all the fish that you see. And you realize we have a real overfishing problem. But when you see the production like this going on, and this is pretty small, I mean, this is probably just a local village, then you know that we've got problems in the overfishing arena. Now, Oman has a beautiful coastline, but it also has the Hajar Mountains, which are like 12,000 feet high. We spent, I think, 2 nights in a tent camp on top, but on our last day, we came down the Hajar Mountains on this curvy dirt road. And if you were suffering from motion sickness or if you had back or neck problems, it wasn't a very happy ride. The best thing about travel, of course, is the food. Everywhere you go, no matter what country, the food is always unique, even in some of the remote places of Africa. But here, we were having Persian food. And the saffron rice and the chicken and the fish, and of course the delicious yogurt and then the bread. Well, let's just say that it's very hard to know when to stop. Now, when we told people we were going to Iran, they thought we were crazy. But we wanted to go. One of the reasons we wanted to go is to see Persepolis. And that's the picture here. Just a tiny little picture of a huge place built 4,000 years ago by some of the great emperors of that part of the world. And I wanted to go so I could meet the people because my experience with Persians in America has been extremely positive. But I knew that we'd have the same experience there, except I didn't know that they loved Americans quite as much as they do. So this is a photograph I took in the market in Shiraz. Our guide had just told this man who sold us some fruit that we were from America, and he was stunned. And he immediately put his hand over his heart as if to say, thank you, bless you for coming here. And I've shown this picture to so many people. In fact, it's been in an exhibit. And actually, it took an award, first place in an exhibit, local exhibit. And it's not that it's such a great photo. I think it's because of the man's expression and the ability of showing his humanity. Sometimes that just doesn't come through. But I think the expression in his eyes and the hand on his heart really does show what he's feeling, and I was very fortunate to be able to capture that. I was also fortunate to be able to capture this. We are in a mosque in Shiraz. It's beautiful because of all the stained glass, the gorgeous rugs, and the tiles. The tile work is exquisite. The room was filled with people. And I saw this woman who looked like she was praying. And I did see that she was being photographed by a man with his camera on a tripod. And then I realized I think she's a model. And I think he's taking her picture. So I took a bunch of pictures, and I did not have a tripod. Wish I did. But this is what I got, which is pretty amazing when I think of all the people that were in that place and the fact that I didn't get even a foot or a hand or an arm or an elbow in this picture. And I'm proud to say I've sold several copies of this photo. And I gave one to Hilda because she expressed her love for it. And so this was my gift to her, and it hangs on her wall. And here's a funny picture taken in the market in Iran. Okay, so you know what these women are wearing underneath these black hijabs? They're wearing sexy underwear, like you see. And I couldn't resist. And this woman was so amused, of course, that I was taking this picture. The other women in the back, I think, were a little embarrassed. A little bit of news about the women in Iran, especially the young women. They all want to get a nose job. And so no matter where you are in a city in Iran, you see women running around with Band-Aids over their noses. And it's another little tale, tells you about that these women, even though they dress like this, they really want to be beautiful. They look beautiful, and even underneath, they're wearing sexy underwear. As I said earlier, I'm really interested in tribal cultures, and there is a tribal culture in Iran. Again, they are really disappearing. We were so lucky to be able to find this enclave. Like the nomads in Sudan, these people do not have markers on a world map or even on a local GPS or map. So we had to spend some time roaming around these stark mountainsides to find them. And as it turns out, we came upon this family. These women are beautifully dressed. The Kashgai, that's the name of the tribe, dress very differently. They don't wear the black hijab. They wear colorful silks and satins. And for rather than wearing headscarves, they really turn their headscarves into turbans. The two young women on the left that are standing are actually daughters of these women, and they don't want to live like this. So this is why the Kashgai are disappearing, because these young women want to live in the city. They want to go to college. They're both in university. One is studying to be a doctor. The other, I think, was studying to be a pharmacist. And they just happen to be visiting. So you can see a couple of us in the back there. I'm holding the camera. And one of the fellows in our group of six, we were six friends. Bruce and John were the only two men and four women. And so I think either Bruce or John took this photo. And photos abound because everybody wants their photo taken, especially when they find out you're an American. And what could be more fun than seeing a bunch of schoolgirls like this just laughing and giggling? And so we took their pictures, and then they had to get out their cell phones and take our pictures. So it was kind of a kumbaya. It was great. But this is my favorite picture of people in Iran because it reminds me so much of when I go out to lunch with a group of women. We're no different than they are. Now, I'm sitting in the back with Bruce and John and my girlfriends, and I see these women, and I think to myself, yeah, these could be women in my book club, and we're out to lunch. And so, much to the horror of my friends, but they're used to me by now, I got up and went to the front. I had my camera, and, I don't speak Farsi, and they didn't speak English, but, when you have an intention and you are able to express it, you can get people to do just about anything. And these women thought this was so much fun. And even the woman giving me the V sign there, and they loved it. And I got this photo that I can show you today. So you can see everybody's happy. And they're eating this wonderful food. What's not to love about that? Especially the bread. Ah, can't wait to eat that bread again. Fidel Castro is alive and well, living in Cuba among his fans. And even though he died a few years ago, he is still living in their hearts. I've been to Cuba 3 times. I love Cuba. It's only 90 miles from our shore, and yet it's one of the hardest places to visit because of our own rules and our embargoes. And you know, I'm really hoping that it will open back up because ever since tourism declined after Trump became president, these people are really suffering. I'm in communication with a lot of them that I'm friends I made there. So I hear the stories. But I've been there 3 times, and each time I got into one of these old American cars and took a drive on the Malecon in Havana. Now, most of the old American cars are Chevys. These happen to be Fords for some reason. But they love American cars, and most of them have Toyota engines in them. And they're, oh man, sometimes they have a hard time getting going. But once you get in it, and they're all convertibles, well, at least that's the kind you have to ride in. It's really, really terrific. Cuba's interesting for so many reasons. Well, their declining architecture is one. When we were there in 2012, we learned that 1.5 buildings collapses a day in Havana, believe it or not. Now, this picture was taken in 2012. And I wouldn't be surprised if that building is still there, actually. It looks pretty good for an old building, but what I noticed in 2018 and 2019 is that the Cubans have become rather resourceful, and they have been able to invest a little money in renovating these old buildings. Now, what I loved about Cuba was the music, of course, and there's music every night in clubs on every street corner. And this is a dancing production here that we're visiting. But it's so colorful. They just have rhythm. And I know that probably all of you love Cuban music because, you know, what's not to love? Now, we're at 12,000 feet here, and we're overlooking the city of Bogota, Colombia. Bogota was really interesting. We went to Colombia on a 3-week photography tour in 2019. And we started off in Bogota, where we spent 3 days, I think, or 4 days. And what intrigued us, especially as photographers, was the graffiti. There's an amazing amount of beautiful murals that are located all over the city, on buildings, on walls, on streets. And this was a graffiti artist that we hired to take us around for an afternoon. And we saw some really, really amazing art. And here in Cartagena, we're in Umbrella Alley. Now, Cartagena is a port for cruise ships. So there were a lot of people in town. And I'm amazed that I was able to get this photo with the mural because most of the time this alley is packed with people. But I must have been early in the morning because I got it. Now, I had to pay for this picture. These women are called palenqueras, and this is their job. They dress up, they carry bowls of fruit on their head, and they walk around Cartagena and they ask people if they would like to take their picture. Now, of course, this is a money-making operation, but I didn't have a problem with that. I just wanted to make sure that I got the women I wanted and that they were placed with the best background. So I got kind of bossy because, you know, first of all, I'm paying them. And second of all, I really didn't want one of them holding a plastic water bottle. And, you know, that kind of thing that kind of destroys the authenticity of it. But I'm honest, and I'm telling you that she's hiding her water bottle under her skirt and behind that table. But it does make for a pretty colorful picture, and there's a story. You might think that you're in the southwest of the United States, but actually you're in northern Argentina in a region called Salta. Most people go to Argentina and go to Buenos Aires, they go to Iguazu Falls or to Patagonia. Very few people, especially Americans, do not go to Salta because, first of all, they don't really know about it. It's a well-kept secret, and it's a hidden gem. They grow wonderful grapes there and make excellent, excellent wines. Bruce and I went there specifically to go to this part of Argentina. We rented a car. We drove on dirt roads most of the time. We learned how to drive dirt roads. You don't go slow. You go as fast as you can, and you roll up the windows so you don't get any dirt in your car. And we didn't have air conditioning. So let's just say it was an adventure. This was also an adventure. I wanted to go to Antarctica. I wanted to stop at South Georgia so I could take photos of king penguins. Now, I know I like taking pictures of people, not wildlife. But when you look at this photo, you can almost imagine that they're two women and a man, or two men and a woman, talking and carrying on. That's what I loved about the king penguins. They were so animated. They were so welcoming. We could go right up to them. They're just not afraid because they've had very little exposure to humans. But the thing that was so amazing about the king penguins is actually this picture. This is a 250,000 pairs. So we got 500,000 king penguins here in this photo. The little guys dressed in brown fur are actually juveniles, and they're going to be shedding those coats very soon, and they'll look handsome like their older counterparts. When you go to Antarctica, you hope to see albatross. They're hard to photograph because usually they're in the air, and the only time they come down to land is when they are courting or breeding. This bird is really large, but it's the wingspan. It's the 11-foot wingspan. They have the longest wingspan of any bird. When you're in Antarctica on an expedition ship, you travel off the ship in these little zodiacs. And yes, it was very cold. We have like 4 layers of clothing on. Actually, I'm in a zodiac in front of this one taking the picture. And we're probably going at the same speed because it's a sharp photo. And I hope that woman taking the photo of us got as good a picture as I did of her. But one of the reasons that you're on the zodiac is so that you can see leopard seals, who just love to lay on ice floats and wait for delicious little penguins to swim by because that's their favorite dinner. And here in Iceland, it was almost as cold as Antarctica, even though it was August. They produce a lot of geothermal energy there. And here you see a pipe in which geothermal energy is being transported to a location where they're making electricity. And one of the great things about freezing cold Iceland is the geothermal pool, where you go to have a soak. That's what you call it. You have a soak. And we loved this soak. The water's about 100 degrees, and it was so delicious until we had to get out because it was a wind and it was freezing. And we had to run to where we took showers and dressed. But, the soak was divine. Get to also take photos of birds and actually be successful. Puffins aren't easy to photograph. And because they don't stay on land also that often. They're like albatross. They're flying most of the time. But I was able to get these 4. And what was kind of lucky for me is that right after I took this picture, they flew off. And I was happy when I got the picture on my screen in my computer and I saw, okay, this will work. When the sun comes out in Iceland, though, this is the kind of view you get. Iceland's pretty easy to get to. There are direct flights from the United States. I highly recommend it. Doesn't matter when you go in the summer, but you could have winter weather. And yeah, it was cold while we were there. And it was also a little chilly in Norway. We took a cruise on a very small ship and we did the fjords of Norway. And we were smart in doing that because most of the big cruise ships could never get into a narrow opening like this. When we did this cruise, we rented cars at each of the ports. We really didn't want to do the big ship excursions because we didn't want to be on a bus with people that we didn't really want to spend time with. But instead, we rented cars and we drove around. We just made sure we were back at the ship on time. And this was a scene in northern Norway. It's an area called Nordkapp or the North Cape, which is the furthest point north in all of Europe. And this is kind of the windy road with no trees that we drove on. Another windy road with no trees or very few trees is riding over the Carpathian Mountains in Romania. People were surprised we went to Romania. We took two of Bruce's daughters with us. They were surprised too, but it was a free trip for them, so they weren't going to turn us down. But Romania turned out to be really an interesting place. And as a people photographer, I was actually pretty satisfied to take pictures of buildings because kind of look like people with two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and a hat. There's also the Mary Cemetery in Romania. Okay, so each grave marker depicts the person that it is acknowledging, buried beneath the grave marker, by a rendition of what that person does with this painting on each grave marker. So, like here, you see a man sitting behind a desk. So maybe he was a tax collector, or maybe he was the mayor. And then back, you see a guy on a tractor, and maybe he was, well, not maybe, he was probably a farmer. Now, I had a devil of a time getting this picture. Actually, that's my only pun of this presentation because these are Tasmanian devils. Tasmanian devils are really reducing in number because they have a terrible disease. And so we went to a place where they're trying to bring them back by doing some healthy breeding and breeding healthy devils that they can eventually send out to the wild. So that's the hope. And they were really fighting mainly over food. I wouldn't want to be out in the woods someplace and come across one. They might want to bite my leg off. Tasmania has a lot of national parks. If you love to hike or if you love to be out in nature, I highly recommend a trip to Tasmania. Here we are at Cradle Mountain. People usually do, 3 to 5 day backpacking trips here, but we just took a 5-mile hike around this beautiful lake so we could get a photo of Cradle Mountain. But the Kimberley Coast of Western Australia was probably the hottest place I've ever been. It's north of Perth, and we were on a 35-passenger catamaran with mainly Aussies, which was a gas. Oh my God, if you've traveled or if you know any Aussies, you'll know how much fun they are to spend time with. But the Kimberley Coast is vast. It's actually the size of Texas, and it's pretty much uninhabited, except for a few Aboriginal tribes, but pretty much uninhabited. But as I said, it was one of the hottest places in the world I've ever been, and humid. So when we returned to San Francisco and we saw the fog coming in, we just took in a deep breath of relief and said, you know what? It's always so great to come home. No matter where you are in the world, you're having an adventure, it's always good to come home. And you walk in the front door of your house and you sit down in the living room and you look at all of the art that you have collected over 20 years of adventure travel. And you think, how lucky we are to have been able to have all these amazing experiences, and how really lucky I am that you were willing to sit through this and experience it again with me. So, yes, this is the end. I want to thank you very much for spending the afternoon with me. I hope you were drinking something tasty. And until we meet again, I enjoyed seeing all of you and your wonderful faces, and I love you all.